All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Riding along on a carousel, trying to catch up to you. Riding along on a carousel, will I catch up to you? Horses chasing, 'cause they're racing, so near yet so far. On a carousel, on a carousel.
And welcome back to the X Zone. This is hour 2 of tonight's show, and we're coming to you on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@classic1220.ca. We'll get it right here into our studios, and I always enjoy getting your emails, X Zone Nation. My guest this hour is Phill Webster, and Phill is in London, England, and let me tell you a little bit about Phill. Phill Webster is a writer, actor, and spiritual teacher. He has appeared in movies alongside Sylvester Stallone, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Elle Fanning. Glowing Deeper is a book 2 of the Letting Glow Trilogy. He lives in London, and joining me now by Skype is Phill Webster. Phill, welcome to the X Zone.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for getting up this very early hour in the UK to join us here tonight. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name's Phill. I'm based in the UK. I grew up on a place called the Isle of Wight, which is a small island at the south of England. I lived abroad for 20 years. I kind of just couldn't wait to get out of there in my early years. And then around 2017, I sort of hit my 40s, and I thought, all right, it's probably time to go home now. So I traveled around a lot, and then came back to the UK 2017, pursued acting, and that was just kind of really of just to do with sort of getting in touch with what sort of like a creativity more than like a need to perform or anything like that. And then, sort of my life sort of took a very different direction after 2020. I lost my mum, and then there was an event that happened around that that really just sent me down a different path completely.
I'm sorry to hear that. No, I was just saying I'm sorry that you lost your mom.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Something happened around her passing, and that was really the catalyst for writing both books, and sort of sent me down this path that I'm on now.
You say that you were in a movie with Sylvester Stallone. Which one was that?
The last one, Expendables 4. Yeah, so that was fun.
Oh, cool. All right, Phill. Tell us about your voyage into spirituality, meditation, mediumship, and you even dabble, or you're interested in European witchcraft in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, this all sort of really came around through something happened when my mum passed. So I'd always kind of had an eye on the esoteric, but just not more than a passing interest. It wasn't really something that I was looking too deep into. But I've sort of gone through various incarnations in life. At one point became sort of very cynical and very practical, and so spirituality wasn't really something that I was looking into. But like I mentioned earlier, so we went through 2020 and the COVID pandemic, and my mom, she was in her mid-70s, and she lived on that place where I grew up, the Isle of Wight. So it's a very rural place, and she'd been alone for like 20 years, something like that. So I tried to do the right thing through COVID and kept away, followed the government guidelines, all that stuff. And I hadn't seen her at this point for a couple of months at the end of 2020 and as we went into 2021. But we would FaceTime every day. And on this particular day, I think it was maybe the second or third time we'd spoken that day, I called her in the evening, and it was around 10 o'clock at night. And as she answered the call, there was a man leaning in, like into the screen as she answered the telephone call, as she answered the FaceTime call also. And I said, well, I was kind of shocked because we were in another lockdown at that point. And I said, who's that? And she said, who's what? And it just kind of threw me off completely because I saw the guy. I saw him long enough that I could describe him. He had thinning gray hair, glasses, probably looked like he was in his late 60s. And I said, well, Mum, I said, the guy, I just saw somebody, who else is in the house? And she said, well, nobody. And just kind of started telling me about her day and just completely dismissed it. And I sort of grilled on it for a while. And then at the end, just sort of thought, okay, well, I guess I was mistaken. And I just let it go. And we spoke for maybe another 45 minutes to an hour or so. And I went to bed that night, and the next morning I woke up to the call that my mum was having a heart attack, and she passed away that morning. So, through all of the grief and the shock that comes along with losing somebody close, and when I always say that when you lose a parent, it's really like stepping into an alternate reality. You really lose true witness to your life. But my mind kept going back to this thing, and I was like, okay, so what are we talking here? Are we talking ghosts or spirit guides or what? I told a few people about it, and of course, depending on which side of the fence people were, somebody was, suggesting that I was just kind of going through the sort of standard grief.
Right.
Whereas other people on the other side of the fence were saying, well, that was obviously a sign, and that was somebody letting you know. So that really was the catalyst that kind of like opened me up to looking at these things in a new way. Yeah.
Tell us about your book, Glowing Deeper.
Yeah, sure. So Glowing Deeper was the second book. I initially started writing about that experience and everything that sort of followed in a book called Letting Glow that came out last year. And I learned so much about sort of spiritual practices, and I really concentrated on mediumship in particular. So when it came to Glowing Deeper, it was pretty much finished Letting Glow, and I'd learned so much about these things, and I sort of poured all my grief into the first book, but through that, it was kind of very bittersweet because there were so many amazing things happening that came along with all this stuff that I was learning about, that I just felt like I'd got a whole other book in me. So Glowing Deeper was kind of less about my personal journey and more about spiritual practices worldwide, such as shamanism and all these kind of amazing things I was learning about along the way.
Is becoming a medium your primary goal?
Initially, I really set out I just wanted to know that my mum was okay, right? And just that she was still around as well, so kind of somewhat selfishly. And I would go so far as to say that I sort of tentatively stepped into this arena, but again, so many amazing things happened that I came to the conclusion that we go on beyond a shadow of a doubt. I'm not sort of trying to enforce my beliefs on anyone else, but I kind of just told my story, and if it resonated with anyone, then great. But yeah, glowing deeper was just, again, sort of like more about just all sorts of other things that I learned about. You mentioned earlier that there's parts on witchcraft,
right?
And there's lots of meditations through the book, and just sort of like really opened me up to this. I just kind of thought, well, what would I like to learn about? And sort of just poured it all into the second book.
What is your ultimate goal? Why is it so important to you that you learn so much? Is it to better understand the death process? Is it better to understand the spiritual aspect of the unknown? I understand that you think, or you did share a near-death experience with your mother.
Yeah, there's so much.
Right.
It just kind of like I sort of opened the floodgates. I mean, I always talk about something that I say about demystifying the mystical. So I feel that we all have these experiences fairly regularly. We talk about sort of walking into a room and cutting the air with a knife, or we can't quite put our finger on something, or we get this kind of innate sense of knowing. And everybody agrees that these are a thing, but then as soon as you start using words like clairaudience or clairsentience or something like that, then it sounds a bit more woo-woo, and people often dismiss it, But I think that we're talking about the same thing. I think it's just a question of semantics. We all have these mystical experiences, for want of a better expression, but we tend to just sort of ignore them because they kind of don't really fit in with every other experience that we have, like on a day-to-day basis. So that was kind of really my sort of primary objective, was to just do that, to demystify the mystical. Yeah.
Why do you think that there are so many people who still classify what you and I believe to be common everyday experiences? When you talk to them about it, it's woo-woo.
Yeah, it's interesting. And a few years ago, I would have also dismissed it as that, I must admit. Like I was saying earlier, I kind of always had an eye on these things, but I wasn't convinced, and some of the things that I talk about since releasing these books, I would have been the first one to be really highly suspicious of it all. I feel that it is an uncomfortable subject. I mean, we tend to ignore death as best we can, and that's just an odd thing in itself, even in a practical manner. But then when you get to subjects of life after death, then it seems to make people uncomfortable. I find the whole thing fascinating, but I also get it that it's not everybody's cup of tea, or it's just not an area that they would
feel
concentrate
comfortable
on. Yeah, and I get it. You have these things, and I've spoke to friends about it, and they're like, well, okay, well that's great, that's interesting, but so what? Like, how does that fit into my day-to-day life? It doesn't really change anything. So I kind of get it in a way, but personally, I've always sort of found these subjects really interesting.
Well, when it comes to death, I think that we misunderstand it. I think that when we die, we go on to another plane, another existence, and I think that Mother Nature has been showing us this from our very beginning. For example, the four seasons. A butterfly, when it starts as a caterpillar, and then it goes into a metamorphosis and comes out as a butterfly. Mother Nature has been trying to tell us, hey, humans, there's more to this existence than you want to accept. And when it comes to death, I think that if this is our point of transition, I think that we go on. I don't think that this is it. But I don't understand why more people do not want to try and understand that death is a reality. The moment you're conceived is the moment you start to die.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I find the subject fascinating, and just again through the experiences that I've had, I'm just sharing them through these books. And if they resonate with someone, then great. If not, again, I get it. But I've always found this the subject so interesting, and it is odd how we kind of just try and ignore it to the best that we can until you're really faced with it.
Yeah. And
then these questions really become the most important questions, I think, when you're really faced with that experience of losing somebody or your own mortality, then it all of a sudden it's all about that, I just find it I think it's one of the most, if not the most important question.
Let's talk more about this when we come back from our first break. Phill Webster is our special guest this hour, Exonation, www.phillwebster.com. And this is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and you're coming to you around the world on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, the radio station in Niagara, the number one radio station in Niagara at that, X Zone Nation. www.classic1220.ca is our link around the world. And of course, if you're driving around Niagara, if you're at home, if you're enjoying yourself somewhere else, wherever there's a radio, just tune it to AM 1220. That's Classic 1220. And that's where we're coming to you live, right here from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines. My name's Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
Stronger. It's a sign of the times, and I know that I won't have to wait much longer. You've changed a lot somehow.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I'm Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our studios and offices in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. Phill Webster is my special guest, and his website is phillwebster.com. And before we went to the break, Phil, we were talking about death and dying. And you would think that as a society, as humans, we'd want to know more about when it happens, when this life that we've come to be born into, what happens next. And I don't know why it's such a negative thing in people's lives. The Irish, they don't mourn those who die. They celebrate the life, and I think that's a great way of looking at it. Because once again, I believe that there's more to death than we understand. And I believe that in certain religious philosophies, they talk about reincarnation, and as well as in the Bible, So why do you think society puts such a negative taboo on death?
Yeah, it is really interesting. Yeah, again, it's not really something that I suppose we sort of that we're faced with day to day in a sense. But then it's coming to everyone. Sorry, I feel like we're going down a really morbid route, but it is it is such an odd subject around it, and the way that we respond to it is really odd. But I do take solace in the fact that all that I've looked into these last few years, and again in writing these books, I truly believe that we continue in some sense that consciousness transcends this physical reality. Yeah, and then kind of again just sort of getting back to what could be discussed as the mystical in general. We do have these experiences all around us all the time. We've just kind of got used to them. Like if you start talking about time and trying to sort of narrow that down, that is a whole mysterious concept in itself that we just kind of accept and move along with. But yeah, when you really start digging deeper, so much to this is truly kind of extraordinary, I believe.
Tell us about the shared near-death experience.
Yeah, sure. So on top of what happened the night before my mum passed,
Right.
And again, this was kind of COVID times, and I don't mean to drag all that up again for everyone. But it took me a little bit of time to get down to the Isle of Wight, where my mum lived after I got the news that she'd passed. Just through public transport, and then having to catch boats and things like this to this island. So by the time I'd got there, I didn't get to see my mum or anything like that. And again, COVID put a lot of restrictions around sort of the normal practices of losing
Right.
somebody. But it was a very hollow, overwhelming sense of loss. Walking into my childhood home, and my mum wasn't there for that. That place had sort of always been this kind of shining beacon for me. Wherever I'd been in the world, that was kind of the place to go back to. So it was just a very profound, overwhelming experience that I'm sure some of your listeners have been through as well. I went to bed that night, again, just with this overwhelming loss.
Sure.
It was permeating everything. And somewhere through the night, I was kind of waking up and sort of dreaming and going in and out of different states. And I remember having this very strong sense of having a conversation with my mum. And I'm essentially talking about a dream, but it was really the most powerful, lucid dream I'd ever had. And it was as though we were kind of just in this state of limbo. I remember facing my mum and telling her what was going on, and that that she'd had a heart attack. And I just remember her seeming really sort of surprised about this. And I just must emphasize, it was just really such a powerful, lucid moment. We were kind of in this room of the walls were swirling and there was all these colors. And I really got a sense that she was at this transition point. And I remember her sort of checking on me, saying, like, "You're going to be okay," And I was like, "Look, I'm going to be fine. You've got to go ahead with this." And she turned and left, and I woke up in floods of tears. So I mean, I did attribute this to a dream, but then the more that I looked into, again, spiritual practices and everything around life after death, this is a fairly common experience that people tend to have. And for me, I took it as, okay, I believe that and I don't know, this sounds way out there, that I believe that I was part of that transition. I mean, at least that's how I interpret it. Yeah.
I don't think that's weird at all. I think that's beautiful. And
yeah,
I
mean, it definitely was. And,
yeah.
When you sort of, I looked a lot into sort of shared death experiences, and it's very common.
Yes, it is.
At a conscious level, as well as sort of in dreams and what have you. And then just sort of really exploring consciousness and learning about meditation, as well as going further into mediumship. Yeah, I believe that's what happened.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
I do, yeah. I believe that we do come here with an agenda, for want of a better word, and that the soul has this blueprint of evolution that we come back and we work on aspects of this sort of greater plan, and we come back time and again with the same people that we've shared things with in the past. Yeah.
That's why I'm so tired, I guess. I keep coming back and back and back again. Let me see here. There's an interesting section in your book that goes very deeply into the metaphysics of time and living in the now. Could you elaborate on that and what inspired it?
Sure. So I had a very profound experience, and I'll just try to sort of keep it to the bare minimum. In my mid-30s, I was living in Helsinki in Finland, and I was living a very sort of shallow existence at the time. I was running nightclubs and bars. I was kind of wrapped up in that, and like living somewhat of a hedonistic lifestyle. I definitely wasn't looking into spiritual things at all. I just remember waking up one morning and just having this real strong sense of, we only really have this moment of now, and I'm not the first person to talk about it, and
Yeah.
other people have definitely explained it way better than me. But it was as though something shifted in that moment, and it was very overwhelming. It was very profound, and it was as though linear time fell away. It was like a kind of this sense of everything being behind me that had happened previously, and then everything in the future just being like an idea or a projection of what I wanted to go towards. I realized that that's somewhat of an illusion. We really only have this moment of now all the time. And I have to say, although it kind of, it sounds quite woo-woo and what have you, something shifted in me, and it was, and again, it was as though linear time fell away, and it was very overwhelming and pretty much sent me into a full-blown panic attack. And it was as though it was suddenly like now, and then it just didn't stop. And people talk about connecting with the moment of now. It was like that times 1,000. And it was terrifying, and it didn't let up, and it was just kind of like now, all the time. I like this ultimate awareness of just being ultra aware of my place in the world, and it just didn't let up. I ended up going to a doctor because I thought I was just losing my mind, essentially, and they started talking about psychosis, gave me anti-anxiety meds, sleeping pills, stuff like that, which just kind of terrified me even further. This just had come out of the blue with no warning whatsoever. And just to sort of cut a long story short, about a few months into this, I found a therapist, and I was just kind of like, okay, this just doesn't work for me. I really just couldn't switch this off. It was just like I couldn't sort of just have a sense of, what am I going to do later on,
Right.
or what did I do yesterday? It was just now, all the time, and it was exhausting. And this guy, thankfully, seemed to know exactly what was going on, and he said, look, you're not losing your mind. He said, what you're having is an awakening. You're experiencing an ultimate reality. And like I say, this was a few months in of this, just not letting up. He gave me a very basic grounding meditation, which essentially just brought me back online or offline, depending on, how you look at these things. And essentially meditation did what medication couldn't, and brought me back out of this overwhelming experience. But it left me with a sense of just being able to sort of connect with the moment of now. I mean, it shattered my ego to pieces, and I sort of came out of the whole thing a lot humbler, and just with a very different outlook. But even that being said, I didn't look at it at the time as a spiritual awakening or anything like that. I was just kind of glad to get through it and come back, so that was really a very powerful experience, and it left a very strong impression with me that we really truly do only have this moment of now. And just to sort of wrap that up, that opens up a whole other chapter of, if there is only now,
Yeah.
then everything that's ever happened is happening right now, or could happen is a possibility in the moment of now. So it opens up this whole arena of metaphysics and alternate universes and all that fun stuff.
Why do you think more and more people are now looking into metaphysics and quantum physics and science for the answers that they have never asked the questions to before?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, at a practical sense, maybe it's just the fact that we have the internet now, and that we're all connected, and we have there's a lot more conversations around this than there would have been perhaps than 20 years ago. People are sort of open to these ideas a lot more than they used to be, and it's not necessarily immediately dismissed as again going back to well, depending where you are in the world, of course, but where I grew up in the 90s, for example, nobody would really sort of pay much attention to this stuff. So I feel that, yeah, people are a lot more opening. I mean, people in spiritual communities do talk about a sort of a grand awakening and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
There might be something to do with it, but I just feel that practically it's possibly just that we're more connected and that we're more open to new ideas.
And we're also more aware of our surroundings. And I think that COVID certainly had a lot to do with us realizing that we're a lot more fragile than we thought we were, because, here's this little bug that is just showing the world that, Hey, you're fragile. Look what I can do. I can shut you down. I can shut your countries down. You can't travel. Oh, wait a minute. If there's this that is happening at this level, what can we do? And what is out there that can pull us back away from what is going on with COVID and bring us back into a reality until we can continue with our life as normal as it can be?
Absolutely. I think that, yeah, that's a very good observation. I think as well as being faced with their own mortality and all the horrific things that happened around that year,
Yeah.
essentially, it really did, we were sat at home. We had to face ourselves. A lot of us were, rightly or wrongly, alone. And yeah, I think it did bring up a lot of questions. Absolutely.
Maybe that was our time of realization and reevaluating ourselves. I know that so many people lost so many people that they loved because of COVID, and it was
Yeah.
quite serious. And then the fear of, well, I may never see mom or dad again, and even if they do pass, I can't get there. So,
Yeah.
so it was an awakening, and you and I will talk more about this on the other side of this break. Exonation, Phill Webster is our special guest this hour, www.phillwebster.com, and he is the author of two great books, Letting Glow and Glowing Deeper. Tell me, Exonation, what changed in your life at the time that COVID was here, and did you have a personal awakening? Many people that I've talked to over the years say yes, they did, and the majority of them were thankful because they finally had their eyes open as well as their heart open. We'll be back on the other side of this break as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, and you're listening to Classic 1220, streaming classic1220.ca.
3 o'clock in the morning, and it looks like it's gonna be another sleepless night. I've been listening to your dreams and getting very low, wondering what I can do. Maybe I'm being foolish, 'cause I haven't heard you mention anybody's name at all. How I wish I could be sure it's me that turns you on. Each time you close your eyes, I've heard it said that dreamers never lie. You've been talking in your sleep, sleeper.
Phill Webster is my special guest this hour, Exonation, www.phillwebster.com. And you're listening to us here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, streaming around the world on we're not doing the X Zone tonight, Craig. Well, I guess we are. You can send an email to xzone at xzoneradiotv.com as well as to xzone at classic1220.ca. You just sometimes make a slip. Phill, going through the information that you sent us, one phrase really grabbed my attention: slipstream superhighway. What is that?
Yeah, sure. That kind of ties into what we were just talking about, and this really goes out there a little bit. Forgive me.
Phill, let me just tell you something, my friend. There's nothing that anybody needs to say "forgive me" when they come on this show to talk.
All right.
Because the door, the format is open, and we're here to hear. We're here to share. So please share with us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it just sort of really comes back to that, talking about we only have this moment of now, and it's kind of quite an out there sort of concept, but at the same time, it's something that we're faced up all the time, And I find it really truly fascinating, again, sort of just really when you sort of tap into that idea that all we have is now, essentially it's all we can experience, then it really does open up this possibility that there's all these multiple realities running alongside us. And science talks of this as well, it's not so much of just a strictly kind of spiritual concept. We really sort of can't decide on what is this thing called time.
Right.
Is it like just now all the time? And when you look at that, that really opens up the idea that it's always been now and it always will be now, which just really opens up everything. So the slipstream superhighway is just kind of this idea that we really do have this sort of this other world running alongside us all the time, and that we just really need to tune into it. And when you talk about manifestation techniques and things like that that are kind of really popular, it really expands on that idea that we have these multiple timelines running alongside us. And the idea is that you just sort of need to tune into that one that aligns with your highest self or your greater future, and kind of shift your energy towards that. And that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about the slipstream superhighway.
But how do we know this is real and not just a manifestation in our own mind to try and make sense of the world that we live in at this very moment in time?
Absolutely, possibly. Smarter people than me have definitely talked about this. I know that Eckhart Tolle is a big one for him. I've never actually read The Power of Now, but I think we're essentially talking about the same thing. And I think it's talking about sort of shifting timelines is a little bit of a buzzword around spiritual communities at the moment. There's a lot of YouTube videos about it and people talking about it on TikTok and stuff like that. But the kind of idea is that right now I could just stand up, fling this laptop at the wall, run out into the street singing, I don't know, something, and cause a big scene. And that would essentially sort of shift me to a new reality than if I just continued this conversation, wrap things up, and I go back to sleep, So we really are faced with this possibility of being able to take this moment of now in any direction that we want. And with the sort of earlier scenario, if I'd done that, then let's say I go cause a scene outside in the street, get arrested, that's going to wake up my fiance, and that'll just shift us all to a completely new reality than if I hadn't done that. So we're sort of really faced with this all the time. We go left instead of right, and that really opens up a whole new direction and a whole new bunch of possibilities and a bunch of more experiences that we have or people that we meet. And when you start sort of digging into this, it's kind of crazy, right? It's really powerful. Well, it's a really powerful thing in itself, yet that's just how life works. That's what we do. We go forward and we make choices and sort of things unfold accordingly. And again, when you start really digging into it, it's kind of really out there, right? You know what I mean? But that's what reality is. We accept that. So, yeah.
So why do people believe that time is more than just a measurement of the rotation of the earth, that there's more to it?
Well, yeah, it is it's probably way smarter than my brain can handle right now at 3 a.m., but I'll try my best. Again, that we have all sorts of theories around this, from Stephen Hawking to Schrodinger's cat in a box theory and all this kind of stuff. Just to sort of go back to that original one, and I'll probably butcher it, but the idea of is the cat alive or dead in the box until it's observed. And I think the original theory was that that the cat is both alive and dead until you observe it. And depending on which time you go with it, it's the cat sort of splits off into two different multiple realities. I think Stephen Hawking went further than that, and way further than that. There was a couple of people in the middle there as well. But the idea is that the observer actually splits into multiple realities. So one where the cat's alive and one where it's dead. And then from each point there, that person's life goes off in two different directions with completely new experiences. And then if you break that down to sort of at the fractional level of everybody from, day one, from the Big Bang or whatever you call it, then that sort of opens up the idea that we do have all these multiple timelines going off in different directions. And it's a lot. Like, I think that's as far as my brain's going to go.
Sure.
At 3 a.m. in the UK. But we're faced with that all the time, and it really is I feel like it's sorry, the word escapes me, but there's just this juxtaposition of possibilities here that science does take seriously, but it does kind of blend in with more sort of spiritual ideas as well.
But at the end of the day, next 24 hours and my next 24 hours, do we really need to think of all these different possibilities of time when many people in this reality have enough problems coping with the time that we endure in a 24-hour period without thinking about multiverses and other timelines? I often wonder if we're not complicating our own life
Absolutely. I mean,
It's
yeah,
like,
you know,
wow.
that's the trick, isn't it? And I feel that this is really just something that comes with exploring deeper. And of course, you can't really walk around like this all day. You know, I still have to pay the bills. I still have
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
do menial tasks. I've got to eat. You know, I'm bothered about what's happening on my favorite TV show and all that stuff. So I'm kind of like I talk about these things like I'm walking around like Yoda, but you know, we're still physical. We're still here, and we have to sort of get on with this.
Exactly.
Um, but I feel that a lot of this comes from just like really going deeper. I feel that especially meditation, which has been a big key to me over the
Hmm.
last few years, when you can kind of just tap in and have that moment of connection with yourself in the present moment, and you start to become aware that you know that you're this conscious observer, that you're not the thoughts that are constantly sort of bombarding us all day long. When you get to step back from that, then you really start to get this sense of self that's kind of outside of the self, you know. And I believe that when you really do connect with that, that's kind of where all this really starts opening up. And it sounds, you know, it does sound kind of somewhat terrifying as well at the same time.
No,
But
it's mind blowing.
yeah, sorry.
No, I was just saying it's mind blowing.
It is, but I feel that there's also a comfort in it because, you know, what can we do? This is what we're doing. This is why we're here, so we might as well just I mean, we've got no choice other than to go along with it.
Yeah.
And it's the way things are set up. So it is just sort of coming back to that demystifying the mystical. I feel like there is the mystical all around us when you start looking into it a little bit beyond the surface level.
The synopsis of Glowing Deeper claims the reader can accomplish their wildest professional goals by revisiting their earliest hopes and dreams. Now, how do you deliver on that?
Absolutely. Again, coming back to meditation. So
Okay.
meditation was really been a big key for me to sort of open up again to this, you know, this idea of a higher self. Also going into mediumship, I feel that just going back to what I mentioned earlier, that when you sort of connect with what I call sort of the backseat driver, this kind of constant observer, this quiet voice
Hmm.
that doesn't get caught up in all the sort of drama and the thoughts and all that kind of thing. When you sort of realize that you're the one observing that, then you sort of become this, you know, this other space. And just yeah, going back to meditation, I feel that that's really the key. And what you talked about there, there's a meditation in Glowing Deeper about really just sort of going back, and it's a guided meditation of connecting with your childhood self and really sort of going back to, you know, what would my 12-year-old self be pleased with if he could go back and ask him now where I am, you know. And I feel that that's a really catch-all question, that if you really go back to your core beliefs and what you truly expected and wanted from life, then you know that's kind of can be quite a good wake up call to see if you're doing a good job at the moment. But yeah, just what I'm talking about in terms of delivering in the book there, there's a very powerful meditation that's kind of tunes into that.
Even if we go back and look at ourselves at the wonderful age of 12 years old, have we met our goals, our dreams, and our desires? Well, I'm sure that when you're 12 years old, you have no concept of the reality of life that you're going to be facing in your 30s and 40s and as you grow on into your golden years. So how can we use that into um, accomplishing our most wildest professions?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm not dismissing, you know, people have different situations.
Right.
I'm not saying that it's all, you know, that you just simply have to, you know, go back and think about what you wanted to do back then and you can shift it. But I feel like it doesn't hurt to get back in tune with that and maybe take steps
I
towards
see.
getting out of a situation that you might not be satisfied with. But of course, you know, I know that everyone's got challenges, you know. I just feel that when we get to that moment, and sometimes everyone's kind of experienced this thing of, you know, when you really sort of set your mind on
Hmm.
something and you're not going to take no for an answer, or you sort of get into that flow state, and things seem to work effortlessly towards whatever it is that you want to head towards, until you start overthinking it and questioning it and bringing all this other stuff into it and the whats and the whys and the maybes. I feel like it is possible to sort of tap into that state, and again, to go a little bit woo woo. I feel that these possibilities are already out there, that we just need to align with them and, you know, take small steps
Sure.
towards them. I don't mean, you know, I'm not sort of going out into the sort of secret territory, you know, like sort of taping a picture of a Lamborghini to the fridge, you know, that it's going to appear. But I feel that everything does evolve from thought at the end of the day. You know, everything that we do comes from an
Yes.
intention. And I feel that just putting those steps into practical, into practice is really what manifestation is about. Yeah.
All right, stand by, my friend. You and I have to take our final break. Exonation, our guest this hour is Phill Webster. His website, phillwebster.com. And Phil and I will be back on the other side as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone and this show for tonight. Boy, these 2 hours just fly by. Talk about a slipstream. Wow. You're listening to us on around the world on... You've got your pencils and papers ready, I know. Classic1220.ca. Don't go away.
Sleeping in your dreams with some sweet love.
Welcome back, everyone. Phill Webster is our special guest. www.phillwebster.com. And Phil, in your book, you also talk about, and I'm talking about Glowing Deeper, you talk about witchcraft, shamanism, ancient Celtic traditions, tarot cards, and so forth. How are these things relevant to a book about raising one's own consciousness?
Yeah, again, just after I'd finished the first book, Letting Glow, and started on Glowing Deeper, I just thought, well, I was just fascinated by all these things that were in this whole arena of looking into spiritual practices. And I thought, well, what would I really be interested in reading about right now? And I kind of look at these books as like a sort of soft introduction to spirituality. I kind of like write about what worked for me, especially going towards mediumship. So all these things were really very much entwined, and I just saw very much similarities between sort of ancient traditions and spiritual practices, compared with what we look at today when we talk about spirituality as a modern kind of thing, or definitely leaning towards mediumship. So yeah, I found the whole arena really fascinating, and just touched a little bit on each of the sort of specifics of sort of traditional ideas, again, about spirituality.
Can you talk to us about ancient Celtic traditions that actually can be incorporated into raising our consciousness?
Yeah, definitely. So I found it really fascinating because, we have, especially in the UK, we have these sort of very strong traditions of spiritual stuff. And I looked at things that I would have ordinarily have dismissed. I started looking into fairies and Celtic folklore, and all that stuff isn't really my sort of comfort zone. I almost felt a little bit embarrassed looking into this stuff, But what I soon found was that there was so many commonalities, sort of like really tied into all sorts of stuff like medicine and kind of just like traditional elements of living from nature. And then when I was looking into things such as nature spirits and stuff like that, there were so many similarities between Celtic traditions and then, say, shamanism, your side of the world, and then in northern Scandinavia at a time where we weren't really connected, how we are now. And when we talk about spirit stuff, even some of the same names, there were like similar names for talking about the same things. And I just found it really fascinating. And then coming back to sort of modern day mediumship, there was so much in common with that. I just found it like a really interesting rabbit hole to go down.
Have you actually tried mediumship yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that was really what the first book was about, and the second book continues with that. So I very quickly, after my mum passed, I was working on a movie. I was working on one of these big Marvel superhero movies, and we had a lot of time between takes, and I started reading sort of traditional spiritual literature, just to sort of help me get through this grieving process, after initially losing my mum. And one book that I came across was by a medium called Claire Broad, called What the Dead Are Dying to Teach Us. And it was all about mediumship. And it was kind of the first time that I'd really looked into it. And what I found really interesting at the time was I didn't know where Claire, the author, was from. She could have been from the States. She could have been from Australia or wherever. But the first story in the book took place across the street from where I lived in London. And,
oh my gosh.
London's a pretty busy place. And I was like, well, how weird. I could look out the window and see the cemetery that she talked about where she had her first kind of psychic experience. And looking back on this, I feel that, these kind of so-called coincidences to become quite apparent when you dive into this stuff. But anyway, that really opened the door towards mediumship, and I soon started training with Claire, and I really got a lot of comfort out of it. I mean, I'm not saying it's for everybody, but I really did experience so many amazing things and from evidence from other mediums, and then learning about it myself and giving other people evidence about people that have passed over. That I know that I don't know, physically describing somebody and stuff like that. So yeah, I found great comfort in it, and I find the whole thing amazing. I'm still amazed by it, and yeah, I feel that there is a great comfort in it for anyone that might be grieving.
Phill, what was it like the first time you realized that you were communicating with somebody who had lived, breathed, played, loved, learned, fought, and every other action that a human being takes, a living human being on this side, and here you are communicating them after they have left this existence and they're somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just still intrigued with the whole process. I know how it works. I know what I need to do to make it work, but I don't know how it works. I'll tell somebody something, and I must stress that I feel that I'm still really at the start of this journey. This has only really been 3 years that I've really been actively looking into this. So I think with the greatest of respect and reverence to mediumship itself, I'm not sort of stepping in here saying, hey, I know all about this. I'm still very much learning about it. But the experiences that I've had so far have been, just really amazing. Just being able to have somebody confirm that all these things that I'm seeing in my mind's eye, that I'm recognizing as not being for me at this point. And that really comes through, again, learning about meditation, being able to take the time to step back from your thoughts. And then when something new comes in, you start to recognize that, okay, that's not me, that's from elsewhere. And then just having somebody validate that, it's just such a wonderful feeling. And then, of course, seeing that person's reaction to that as well, to just sort of confirm these things. I just find the whole process fascinating. Yeah.
Is it possible, Phill, that we all have the ability to communicate with those on the other side, but for some reason, whether it's religious or sociological, that we have blocked it? Could we be depriving our own existence from actually using this gift that we all have? And what do you think the world would be like if we all could communicate with the other side?
Yeah, that's I've never sort of taken it that far. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, I do believe that we all have the ability to do this. I don't think anyone's particularly more special than the other. And again, through writing these books, my intention is that if the reader took the journey with me, then what worked for me might possibly work for them. But I feel like it might just be a sense of sort of looking at it like a Wi-Fi signal. In some people it's stronger than others, and I feel like it's you can develop it and you can sort of work on that. But the key is really, and this is kind of where the skeptics come in, that when you start looking for this stuff, then they would argue that, okay, well, you're going to see it, when you start sort of like looking for signs. But I do feel that is actually the way that it works. When you do start diving into it, then these things tend to happen more often than not, and then you start to recognize them as such. But yeah, I do believe that we all possess the ability to do this. I think it's just part of whatever this experience is that we're going through. We just get so distracted, with the mundane, and really tuning back in, I feel like is key to something that's always been there. Yeah.
Have you found, since your investigation into or the understanding of metaphysics, that there have been more coincidences in your life than before?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm guilty as well of just sort of getting caught up in the everyday mundane, especially after the publication of my first book. I kind of jumped on the whole thing about doing interviews, started thinking about book sales, and it ironically took me away from why I wrote the book in the first place, So I've sort of come back around again to that, and just sort of trying to incorporate meditation into the everyday and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I feel like that we all have this possible, the possibility to tune into these things, and that it's as real as anything else that we experience. But it's just a matter of sort of taking the time to just sort of sit with that and sort of being open to it. Yeah.
Glowing Deeper is titled Book 2 of the Letting Glow Trilogy. Are you already starting on the third book, and how does it compare to the first two?
Yeah, I started it on a third, but it seems to be going in a different direction. It seems to be sort of bigger than these. These are very much, these first two books are very much connected with my own personal grieving journey.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, the third one seems to be opening up to like a really wider perspective of beyond my story. It's really fascinating. I feel like I'm learning a lot as I write it. So yeah, it's an interesting process. But yeah, hopefully book three is going to be on the way as well soon.
After having completed both of your first two books, how do you look at death now?
In a very different light, absolutely. I don't feel afraid of it anymore. I feel that it's just a part of the bigger picture. I
Hmm.
feel that this life is just part of a grander tapestry, and that we're all connected, that we're all part of the same soul, just
Yeah,
having individual experiences. And viewed from that point of view, wrongly or rightly, I still don't know, But the things that I've experienced so far very much seem to point to the fact that, to the idea that we go on. And yeah, that it really has taken a lot of the fear away from me, and I truly believe that we do transcend this life. Yeah.
Paul, what are your final thoughts, and what would you like to share with the Exo Nation tonight?
Yeah, I mean, all these subjects are, they sort of they go quite out there, but I feel that the key really is just being comfortable with yourself. And meditation for me really was really the catalyst to this, to just being able to take that moment to just sit with yourself and being aware that we all have this inner voice, and it's normally the voice that steps in moments of crisis, and this kind of quiet inner knowing that sort of speaks up every now and again. And I feel like being able to tune into that really opens the door to all of these things. Yeah.
So, what's in the future for you, Phill? More movies?
I'm not sure. I mean, this like my life's gone in a completely different direction to where I thought it was a few years ago. Acting isn't really the really main priority for me right now. I feel like this has really taken over. Of course, I'm not going to turn down an acting job if it shows up.
Of
Needs to pay the
course.
bills still.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, let's see. I'm interested to see where this continues to take me.
Phill, this hour has gone by so fast. I'd like to, thank you very much for coming on the show at this early hour where you are. And I wish you much success. And I am sure, after having had the opportunity of talking to you for the hour and hearing about your books, that they will undoubtedly open up a lot of minds, a lot of hearts, and give people who have lost a lot of inner peace.
I hope so. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was nice talking to you.
It's my great pleasure. Phill, take care of yourself, and I'd love to talk to you after book 3 is out.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Take care, Phill. And Exo Nation, if you'd like to find out more about Phill Webster, our special guest, his website is phillwebster.com. And Phill, where can your books be bought?
They're available at all the usual bookstores. You can order them from, Barnes and Noble and all the rest of it, and of course on Amazon.
All right. Thanks again, Phill. All right, Exo Nation, that's it for tonight. I will be back a Monday night as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And we come to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here from our studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world or on classic1220.ca. So until next we meet, my friends, always remember to give your children a hug, let them know they're loved, and always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone. Have a safe weekend.